I want to introduce you to CASAS testing here in the Adult High School at Maricosta College, which we will be rolling out in all of our courses as of spring 2018. For those of you unfamiliar with CASAS, it's one of the most, or it is the most widely used competency-based assessment being used in the U.S. It is different than a placement test, so if you're more familiar with placement tests, this is slightly different. It is meant to assess students' real-world basic skills, and we do this at the beginning of each term, and we'll do this at the end of each term. And I'm about to explain why it is that we're doing this. So we have multiple funding streams that help pay for the resources here at the non-credit programs as well as the adult high school. Testing is going to help us to record our student progress, but it's also going to help us capture demographic data and demonstrate that we are assessing our students' workforce readiness skills. All of these things are required by multiple grants that we receive. Those results are going to be reported, showing our accountability and the populations that we're serving. All of that will be reported to multiple funding streams, including AEBG, WIOA, and Strong Workforce. And all of that will then result in access to these funding streams. Some of these are new. WIOA for us is new. That is the Workforce and Innovation Opportunities Act. This is a grant we applied for earlier in the year and received for the first time in adult high school history. We received about $184,000, and that is tied to our student results and them making progress on these tests. But funding that we've already been receiving, and with you're probably already familiar, is the Adult Education Block Grant, or AEBG. They've changed some of their reporting, and now much of the information that they need, when they need it, and how they need it reported is in line with the way that WIOA wants their data reported. So although we came to CASAS separately from AEBG, it has proven to be very helpful in reporting for AEBG as well. One additional funding stream that CASAS will help us to report to is Strong Workforce. This is, again, another large grant that helps to fund some of the programs here in non-credit and the adult high school. So what's the testing going to look like in your classroom? You're going to have two tests. The first one will be in week 1. This is the pre-test. This is meant to assess the student's knowledge base coming into the class prior to any instruction. Most, if not all, students will test in term 1 of each year, and then you'll notice in terms 2, 3, and 4 that fewer students have to pretest simply because students only pretest once in an academic year. We will be telling you, the instructional aides, myself, or Bea, will be letting you know who it is that will be pretesting in your class. We'll have a roster available to you before the first day or on the first day of class. In terms of the test itself, we may be able to find sample testing materials for your test. However, not all tests have sample materials. That being said, you're not allowed to actually teach to the test, so we don't provide instructors with the actual testing materials in order to prep their courses in any way. Students are going to be completing the test in one of two ways. If you have designated lab time, like an English class might, for example, then your students will probably be taking an e-test. This will just be completed online. Students who are testing on paper are the ones who don't have a class with designated lab time. So our math courses, for example, may test using Scantrons instead. In everyone's class, whether you have a paper Scantron or you're testing online, a campus aide is going to be in class with you to assist with proctoring. Post-testing looks nearly identical to pre-testing, except that it takes place in week 7. And during the post-test, all of your students in your class will post-test. The only exception would be if you have a student who happens to be dual enrolled in, say, 2 math classes or 2 English classes at the same time, then they really only need to test 1 time. We don't need 2 different results. Again, you may have students who are testing online or on paper, and a campus aide will be there to help you with the post-test as well. Post-tests, again, take place in week 7, and you'll get a schedule in advance of the semester starting and the term starting, so you know exactly when your test days and times are. Makeup exams occur when a student doesn't show up for the testing day, or you perhaps have added a student after your testing day, which sometimes happens. You do not have to administer the makeup exam. Our campus aides will do that for you. You will need to make sure that you communicate to the student that they are required to take the test outside of your class time. Typically, we will do this in our testing center, but we may also have other options available as well. We need to make sure that all eligible students are testing, so this includes the in-class and the makeup exams. The campus aides will always have a roster of the students who should be testing in your class. If you have added anybody or if you have dropped anybody, you need to let your campus aides know. If you've added them, they need to make sure that the students test. If you have dropped them, maybe by the post-test, or the student is no longer attending and you need to drop them, then you need to make sure to inform your campus aides so that we don't look as though we missed testing a student when the student is actually no longer with us. So we have 2 tests that we're going to be giving in all classes. We will test on English and we will test on math. So English tests have already been used in all of our English courses. We will now be expanding those to all of our social science courses and all of our fine arts courses. Math, we will be testing in obviously all of our math classes, but we'll also be testing all of our science classes with the math test as well. In terms of a student's test results, every student, whether they complete the test online or on paper, will get a score, and they will also be given a skill level descriptor. This simply is a summary of the skill set that they currently have based on their score. If a student is completing the test online with an e-test, they will get their score immediately. As soon as they hit submit on the last question, it will pop up and it will also give them this skill level descriptor. I encourage you to go over the score and the descriptor with your student. If you complete the test in class on paper, you can expect to receive your students' scores within about a week. Our instructional aides will need to scan the Scamtrons manually and then send you a report with the scores as well as the skill level descriptors, which you will then need to disseminate to your students. Regardless of the testing method, I recommend going over these results so that they can understand their scores, their progress, and the context of this skill set. Sometimes it does not match up very easily or clearly with the skills you are teaching in your class, even though to us they actually are very relevant. So making that more obvious to our students is crucial. I also recommend posting the scores in Canvas. You do not need to assign a grade to these tests. However, I have noticed that when I have posted the score in Canvas, it makes the assignment feel more real to them, and it keeps them more accountable for completing it if, for example, they missed on the original test day. And then finally, it's a place they can go back to after they've post-tested and be reminded of their progress from the beginning of the term to the end of the term. In order to be able to facilitate the CASAS testing, you will need to complete training. This really is not very time intensive. Depending on how quickly you read, it takes about 1 to 2 hours. It's online and it's self-paced and it is flex eligible. We're going to be holding a morning and an evening training session during the Wednesday of Flex Week when we come back in spring. So if you have any questions regarding the training, you can certainly come to one of those and we'll help you with them. I would encourage you, if you can, to complete your training during Flex Week online, or even before the holiday break if you have time, but I know it's very busy. In order to complete your training online, you're going to simply Google the CASAS training website. Once you're there, you will create an account and register for these two classes. They're called the CASAS Implementation Training and the CASAS eTests Online Proctor Certification. Although some of you may not be using eTests yet, you eventually may be, and I think that if we are able to get you into a lab, we will. Therefore, I would like both trainings to be completed, even if you don't anticipate using the eTests just yet. And then finally, after you've done each training, you'll get a certificate. Please make sure that you forward this to me either on paper or via email. I am going to just keep a file of these so that at some point when we're audited by CASAS, I have immediate proof that all of our faculty are trained as proctors. Some instructors have shown some concern about how to incorporate CASAS into their class, and I think that that's a valid concern. When we first began this in English courses, it took a little bit of retooling, obviously, to take out week 1 work and week 7 work in order to accommodate the tests, and we wanted it to also feel relevant to our students. One way that I have accomplished that, and I know other English instructors have, is to use it as a first week diagnostic. The scores from the CASAS test give us an indication of the skill set our students are entering with, because the test asks them to read multiple passages and respond to comprehension questions. I use that score then to talk with my students about how well they may perform in my class, if this seems to be the right class for them, if they've scored high or low according to what I think might be required of that particular course. Not all students will need to pretest, like I mentioned before. So for those who don't, we always offer a similar in-class assignment that tests virtually the same skills. It's very important that this be a silent in-class assignment that's completed individually, so this should not be a group activity that requires discussion, to ensure a quiet testing environment. The results of both the CASAS test and the alternative assignment for the non-CASAS test takers become a means of assessing the entry-level skills of our students and often lead to individual conversations about the results. So for example, I might have a student who scores very high for an English 2 course, and I may go ahead and recommend that student move on to English 3 instead. Some instructors have also noted that they already test quite a bit in their classes and they're worried about adding another 2 tests, and I think that that is also a very valid concern. Unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, this is something we will need to work into our classes. I hate to say you're going to need to remove material because I don't know that you need to remove material. I know for our classes, mine specifically, I did not have to really remove material so much as I had to rethink what my diagnostic looked like. I always had a diagnostic, so incorporating it into my class was not adding an additional assignment like it may be for some. The best I can say is that in terms of scheduling for term 1, you will always pretty much plan on the majority of your students needing to pretest, and they will all post-test. So for term 1 every year, you really do lose that time in class. So I encourage you to find a way to make that testing time relevant, or the test relevant in some way to your students. In terms 2, 3, and 4, however, the number of pretesting students really does decrease pretty significantly. If you have small enough numbers in your classes, let's imagine, for example, you have a class of 25 students and only 3 of them are pretesting. We will do everything in our power to be able to, say, move those 3 students out of your class and go test elsewhere so that you can have a regular day of class in that first week instead of having to devote the entire time to pretesting. This will need to be done on a case-by-case basis, obviously, and based on availability, but we'll always do our best to work with you. Attendance is very important for CASAS. we have to report how many hours our students have completed because they can only be tested and their results valid if they have completed at least 40 hours of instruction. We already record positive attendance, but we will be having to now report it monthly. This will be a shift for us, but we are hiring 3 or 4 instructional aides to be helping not only with proctoring the exams, but also with attendance. So stay tuned. We're still working out those wrinkles, but we will let you know as soon as possible that how we have figured out what we're doing with attendance, how they'll be collecting it, how they'll be helping you to collect it and report it. Finally, I think the most important thing to get across is that we may like or we may not like CASAS, but either way, it's here to stay, and we need to work to make it productive. Our attitude about the testing is obviously going to shape the attitudes of our students. We have had cases where the faculty have downplayed its importance or shared grievances about the tests, and pretty immediately we saw much lower scores result from those particular class sections. This is a test that requires or hopes to see student progress, and so the more positively we can present it to our students, the better. Regardless of how we feel about the test personally, we need to also explain to our students that it's helpful in identifying their current skill level, which many of them actually really appreciate once you sit and talk about it with them. But I think the bigger picture that we also want to explain to them is that these results help us to fund the incredible resources that they receive in our program. 2 examples I can explain just from our English program are we were able to purchase another laptop cart for one of our classrooms based on the money that we have received from WIOA. We are hiring campus aides in order to help in all adult high school classes. Those aides will be available to help with CASAS, but then once CASAS testing is done, we will have those aides every week to help us with issues like retention and positive attendance and grading and activities in class, much like our ESL program on campus already has. And one other benefit our English program saw just in this last year, our writing coach hours in the Writing Center were meant to be cut because the main campus was not going to fund as many hours anymore for us. And fortunately, because of the funding we had secured, Nikki was able to say, no, we can keep them the same number of hours we've always had them, and we will pay for it. So there are some very tangible benefits to all of this funding and making sure that we remain eligible for all of this funding. And I hope that not only as faculty we recognize that importance, but we will share that with our students. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to me. My email is eduran@maricosta.edu. You can always contact Angela. You will also be becoming familiar with our campus aides more and more. We're hiring more of them. So I don't have everyone's names just yet, but you will become familiar with Bea Aguilar if you have not so far. She is helping to head up this entire project and is basically running the money, so to speak. You'll also become familiar with Nora. She's our lead campus aide, and Sulema, who is one of our other wonderful campus aides. So just know that there is an entire team here to support you. We want this transition to go as smoothly as possible, but we also want to be here to help you be successful. So please reach out if you need us. Thank you for taking this on, and I'm looking forward to working with you as we roll this out.